Welcome to the Athletic FC podcast. I'm Adam Leventhal. So Chelsea's young squad were given a reality check on their Champions League return. So will a lack of experience cost them in Europe and the Premier League? Well, with me is our Chelsea correspondent, Simon Johnson, who is out in Munich at the moment, at time of record, and our newsletter lead writer, Phil Hay. Gents, thanks very much for being with me. So Chelsea beaten 3-1 in Munich by Bayern. If you didn't catch it, it was an own goal from Chalobah, then a Kane penalty, followed very quickly afterwards by Cole Palmer's goal for Chelsea. And then Gusto gifted the England captain a second in the second half. But what else was the difference between the two sides? Simon, you've written about the contrast in experience. How stark was it?
Well, I think we should sort of emphasise that half of the players that played last night were making their Champions League debuts. The fact that Jamie Gittins, who didn't even get on, has instantly been projected or boosted to become the second most experienced Champions League player that Chelsea have in their squad. And he's only 21. He's only been there 5 minutes. Reece James leads the way, obviously, the only survivor from the 2021 campaign. So inevitably, I think that's going to make a difference. You only have to sort of compare Harry Kane to João Pedro. Now, I thought João Pedro had a good game leading the line, but this is chalk and cheese in terms of performing at the highest level in terms of Champions League. Harry Kane, with his 391 club goals and only the third player in Champions League history to score over 20 goals for two different clubs in the Champions League. And João Pedro is making his debut in the competition. I mean, it's significant. And what I felt during the game itself was that Bayern Munich effectively won the sort of decisive moments, that they were able to ride out the storm when Chelsea were on top far better than the other way round, and Chelsea sort of seemed to crack under the pressure a bit whenever sort of Bayern were testing them defensively. And second half in particular, I sort of felt that Bayern Munich just had that extra know-how. And don't forget that Enzo Maresca too, this was his first Champions League game as head coach of Chelsea, and his first game in the Champions League too. And whilst Vincent Kompany is not exactly a veteran, he only experienced it as a head coach last season for the first time. But I think even then, Kompany sort of edged it in terms of that experience level and perhaps made the changes tactically that made a difference in the second half and ensured Bayern came out on top.
There's so much attention, Phil, isn't there, on Chelsea? Obviously, they've had an incredible year winning the Club World Cup. But the last time they were actually in the Champions League, the campaign had started with Thomas Tuchel in charge, ended with Graham Potter. It's easy to forget how much has changed at Chelsea over a short period of time, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think they could definitely do without that being the case again this season. A repeat of that isn't going to do them any good. Chelsea are this sort of model of constant evolution. They're like a club who can't stop themselves changing or tweaking or mixing things up, something they constantly have to be doing. They're going to have periods where the status quo is allowed to continue for a while, but it's almost like itchy feet syndrome, especially in the transfer market, where they're always tempted by something new and something fresh. I think if the grand plan for them is to be England's top team or Europe's top team, then there does have to come a point where the project or the setup is allowed to ride, and that's probably where they are now. Ready for some continuity, suited for some continuity. I mean, Maresca was new to the job last summer, got them into the Champions League and won the Club World Cup. Also won the Conference League, but it would have been quite an achievement not to have won that, given how much depth Chelsea had. Those were really necessary first steps for him, especially a top four finish, I would say, and they did shore up his position. And what they're trying to do now is take that second step, which I guess is to make a bigger dent in the Premier League, not necessarily to win it, I think that's probably asking too much, and to make a relative splash in the Champions League. And they weren't terrible last night. It was a difficult game, and I thought in periods they played well. But they were naive, particularly around Bayern's goals. And you have to say that the club are kind of inviting that by investing so heavily in players who are pretty wet behind the ears. And, that's the strategy they've chosen. And since it is the strategy that they've gone for, some naivety, I think, has to be tolerated for a while. It's not that everybody on the pitch is, exceptionally or ridiculously young. But as Simon's pointed out there, and particularly the reference to Gittins, you don't find vast Champions League experience or title-winning experience in this squad as it stands. And the same goes for Maresca as a coach too. I'd agree with Simon that in the second half it did feel like Kompany handled the state of play better than Maresca did. But I would say that the more Chelsea are able to let the core of the squad settle and to keep Maresca involved as well, I think the better it will get. Last night just told them that they're a way off it yet.
Just a quick one from you, Simon, on the games to come. And interestingly, Benfica next with Jose Mourinho in charge. Just get me clear on this one, because the last time I was at Stamford Bridge, they were singing for Jose Mourinho. Obviously, a lot's changed since I was there. They've won a couple of trophies, and Enzo Maresca's worked out perfectly fine. But what sort of reception will he get?
It's a really good question, because don't forget, when he came back as Manchester United manager, he was booed.
Yeah.
And he was fantastic. Classic Jose on the pitch. First of all, doing the three fingers and pointing at three fingers, and then doing this to signify his 3 Premier League title wins with Chelsea. And then in the post-match press conference said, until someone wins 4, Judas is number 1. Again, referencing his 3 Premier League titles with Chelsea. So,
can I ask you why they did boo him, Simon? What?
Because Jose inevitably, once he left for rival like Manchester United, he did have a few things to say that upset the fan base. Inevitably, I always found it a bit surprising, because if anyone should know what Mourinho's like, it should be Chelsea fans, and actually not be sort of that offended, because that's Mourinho, that's what he does, and Chelsea certainly benefited from Mourinho when he was at his pomp and in the kind of the mind games and the kind of barbs that he would say about rival managers. But maybe sort of with a bit of time and the fact that Jose isn't quite what he was, that I hope that people will give him the respect he deserves. For me, he is Chelsea's best ever manager. I know he didn't win the Champions League, but I think his DNA was all over the team that won in 2012. And even after he left the first time, that squad was essentially his, and sort of other managers benefited from winning trophies with that squad. And of course, he came back and won again, and a League Cup too. So it's going to be interesting. But just quickly, I just want to add, Chelsea have also, when we're talking about the squad, I think we should bear in mind that, without sounding like Mikel Arteta or perhaps managers of other clubs, injuries have also started to hurt them sort of very early on, particularly being without Levi Colwill defensively. That's a serious setback, and he's going to be out for most of the season. And you sort of feel that Chelsea are sort of at the moment struggling to adapt to his absence. Of course, losing Liam Delap already, they've lost an option in terms of leading the line. Dario Sugo is a backup to Caicedo. He's actually been left out now of the group phase of the competition because he's had an operational thigh injury. So that's also a factor that we should bear in mind. But that's not making out that Chelsea don't have quite a few players to choose from.
Now, we're going to be discussing Nicolas Jackson now and his appearance for Bayern Munich against Chelsea, and the transfer intricacies, which continue to be very, very interesting indeed. But before we do that, a quick bit of trivia for you. And Phil, you can jump in here. You've got a big brain on football, but I'm expecting Simon Johnson to shine here. Nicolas Jackson is only the 4th player since 2000 to play for both Chelsea and Bayern Munich. Who are the other 3 players?
I'm so sleep deprived that the brain is a little bit. So I'm sort of instantly going, you've called me out there, Adam.
3 different nationalities.
Well, Iron Robin. There we go. There's
Iron
one.
Robin. That's one. You've got a German and a Peruvian.
Oh, Ballack?
Ballack, Michael
yeah.
Ballack. Indeed. And the Peruvian?
Oh.
Come on, Si, you're big on Peruvians.
I'll give it to you.
Strike.
Claudio
Pizarro.
Well done. There will have been thousands and thousands, maybe even millions of Chelsea fans going, come on, Si. You can't be that rusty at this time of the morning. Come on.
No, I
Come
really
on.
am. Any regulars are straight out of Cobham know that my performance in quiz things is very hit and miss. It depends how much sleep I've had.
Let's focus on seeing Nicolas Jackson playing for Bayern Munich against Chelsea last night. It was very, very late on. He came on in stoppage time. Just tell us what the reaction was at the moment and the emotions of seeing him appear for Bayern Munich after everything that had gone, with his transfer on, off, on again, and very complicated, Simon.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of introduction, so it came so late, it kind of went a little bit unnoticed, and I think the cheers were, certainly from the Bayern fans, were mainly because of Harry Kane and his superb performance and 2 goals. I thought what was most interesting was pre-match, because Nicolas Jackson was seen sort of hugging Chelsea staff. There was a moment just before he went down the tunnel after the warm-up where there was Andre Santos and Esteban Willian, a couple of guys that he didn't really get to play with at Chelsea. Obviously, he trained with them a little bit. Really warm hugs. They actually went down the tunnel, sort of arms around each other's shoulders. Mark Guiu was there. Of course, he's been recalled from loan at Sunderland to partly sort of fill in for Jackson. So it all felt very friendly, and I think that as teammates, that's not a massive shock. I think Jackson was a pretty popular member in the dressing room. Reece James pre-match spoke of his surprise that he's gone. I didn't know whether that was a slight sort of questioning sort of Chelsea's decision, or in fairness, Jackson wanted to leave too. Shouldn't be forgotten that Jackson was pushing for a move once João Pedro and Liam Delap were signed, and of course instantly were promoted above him at the Club World Cup, and I think he saw the writing on the wall that he'd be third choice this season, and with the World Cup in mind next summer, he wants to obviously play. Now the question is how much will he play for Bayern Munich? It's early days, two games, 2 sort of substitute appearances. Bayern Munich showed last night that they've got a pretty good attack. They were pretty impressive, it has to be said. I mean, quick shout out for Elise. I mean, my word, there's a player that Chelsea decided not to sign because of the wage demands. They just could not compete with Bayern Munich's wage demands, but he looks worth every penny. But yes, of course, there's been a lot of chat the last few weeks of the nature of Chelsea's deal and agreement with Bayern Munich. Uli Hoeneß, just when he thought it all died down, because it's quite a dramatic transfer, will he, won't he? And then the deal finally gets done, and Uli Hoeneß then sort of starts talking about the terms of what will turn this loan into a permanent signing. But I've been assured, regardless, that Jackson is going to be a Bayern Munich player. There's great confidence in his camp that this is going to be a permanent move.
Yeah, I mean, often we talk about loans with options, loans with obligations. If he's saying, yes, this is going to become, or he's questioned, I suppose, Uli Hoeneß, what you're talking about, that the conditional obligation. We've had some weird obligation clauses in the past, basically where they have to walk through the door at reception, and yet then it's been actioned, or they've got to spend 1 minute on the field, or this, that, or whatever. Do we know exactly what the conditional obligation is, Simon?
Well, according to Hoeneß, he has to start 40 games. He's the only one that's come out and been public. When I've sort of put this to people I know at Chelsea, they're certainly not commenting on the exact clauses that will make this permanent. There's been reports since Hoeneß came out with his comments that it will only be 45 minutes, as it were. That it's not just starts, it's where he plays 45 minutes, which of course he did against Hamburg on Saturday. But I stress again that the vibe that certainly Chelsea are happy with the deal regardless, because they've got a very good loan fee, and if he has a good loan, even if he doesn't, he's still 25, and they're very confident in terms of next summer. They're still very confident that they'll get a very good fee for him. And as I just pointed out, I think there's a feeling on quite a few sides that Bayern Munich will make this a permanent deal. But of course, it would help for that to happen, for Nicolas Jackson to make a big impact. And I still think he will. I mean, what an option to have. The other question mark about him sort of being able to make enough appearances is, of course, AFCON in the new year, which will take him away from Bayern for a few weeks.
Just a discussion about the loans with obligations. I wonder how long that whole routine is going to be allowed to fly by the authorities. Particularly deals which are just basically straight obligations. It's clearly different with Jackson because certain criteria needs to be met. But you do see quite a large number of loans which are basically loans with a cast iron obligation at the end, which means they're guaranteed to become permanent after 12 months or whatever it is. And it doesn't seem to be anything other than a means of kicking the PSR can down the road. And I do think at some stage, various governing bodies might say to clubs, if you're effectively signing him permanently, then sign him permanently. Just you have to do it now, because it's a bit of a daft loophole which only seems to serve PSR constraints. But one of the things that does fascinate me about Chelsea is the way that they seem to land on their feet financially. Time and again, and I'm not talking about the sale of hotels or the sale of the women's team. They do have this fairly remarkable knack of recouping money from the transfer market, and it doesn't always work, doesn't always pay off. And Kunku had to take a hit on, or had to take a hit on for him to go to Milan. But to take Jackson, so like you said, he was kind of 30 million or thereabouts when Chelsea signed him in 2023. Chelsea don't want him anymore. In their eyes, he's not good enough, he doesn't fit. But whatever it is, he's expendable. Yet somehow he's gone to Bayern Munich, which some people would say is a step up, but one way or the other is a very, very elite transfer. For a loan fee of about £40 million, according to our reporting, and an obligation of £56 million. So they're basically doubling the money on him. And it might not come to pass, and it's a little hard to tell judging by the noises coming out of Bayern, although Simon sounds pretty confident about it, or gets the feeling that Jackson's people are confident about it. But whenever we chat about Chelsea, I always go back to something that one of our other Chelsea writers, Liam Toomey, talks about, which is this thing of Chelsea having a portfolio of footballers in the way that some people have portfolios of houses or property. The portfolio is blatantly designed, in part, to make a profit on transfers. And I can't deny that Chelsea seem pretty skillful at it, Jackson being the latest example. Whether it takes them where they want to go competitively, as I said at the start, I think is a moot point. But they do know how to make assets appreciate in value. And I think there'll be a fair number of clubs out there who are quite envious of the way they do it.
Yeah, and Simon, they did make a profit this summer, didn't they? £294 million worth of transfer fees in. It allowed them to spend £284 million. Why did they need to make a net profit this summer? Because, I mean, Phil mentioned there in his last answer those three letters.
Yes, but this was particularly important for UEFA because, of course, Chelsea were punished by UEFA for breaching their financial rules. And not only were they fined, but there was a condition put in place that to register new players on the A list, Chelsea had to have a positive transfer balance from the Champions League squad to the Conference League squad in the knockout phase. So that's why the sort of the importance to bring a lot of money in was even more important this year. But they've been doing it anyway. And this is sort of touching on sort of Phil's sort of point about Chelsea being good sellers. This is part of their model in terms of buying young, putting them on long contracts and on lower salaries than the Abramovich era. Because obviously what was the stumbling block for when a player was no longer wanted in the Abramovich era was, of course, they were older, on more money, talking generally here, and it was harder to shift them. Of course, if you're still young, you're not on stupid money. It makes it a bit easier to sell, even if a player has not worked out. So that's why Chelsea will feel like their model is working, certainly from a sort of a business point of view.
Just a word, Phil, with you, because all these players coming in, the churn of young players developing, and look, they're a good side, Chelsea. They've won trophies and they're moving in the right direction with a crop of young players mixed with some experience as well. But amongst that experience is not Raheem Sterling. 88 Champions League games throughout his career. He's out in the cold. It does feel strange that you can have someone so experienced and with the potential of adding something completely cut out of the deal.
I just don't think there's a market for him in particular. He's going to be expensive. He's on a high wage. He's into his 30s. He's been drifting for a while. He doesn't strike you as an asset that you particularly want to throw a huge amount of money at. I wonder if he ends up in MLS or Mexico, which more and more feels like a market for players of his kind of age and level, if they're looking for something fresh and different. Saudi possibly, although I do get the feeling that Saudi clubs are getting a bit more savvy with the money that they're prepared to spend on players. So where it goes for Sterling is hard to say, apart from to kind of reflect the fact that it will be him exiting Stamford Bridge at some point. I'm just not sure how they're going to make that happen and what concessions are going to have to be made on either side in order to ensure that it does.
So on Friday, Chelsea were handed 74 charges for alleged payments to agents. And Simon, you had the honour and the enjoyment of having to break this down for us on The Athletic. Just explain what it's all about in as best way as you can.
Yeah, in as brief a way as I can. So look, this is issues that were flagged from the Roman Abramovich era, and when the new owners were and the consortium were doing their due diligence on taking over the club in 2022, they became aware of things that didn't look right, and the unusual situation of a club basically telling on themselves, which is unheard of. You sort of go, actually we want to, but they were able to sort of say, well, it wasn't us. It was the person that we're essentially buying the club from, and they negotiated £100 million discount from the initial asking price of 2.5 billion. Now, what were these charges related to? Essentially, it's about the alleged payments made to agents. It obviously was a significant amount, hence the 74 charges, and there's some real high profile signings, not that the players were guilty of any wrongdoing, but some of the players, we're talking about key players for Chelsea, Eden Hazard being perhaps sort of like the sexiest name that's come to light. Willian, of course, who Chelsea fans sing on a regular basis about how Roman Abramovich stole him away from Tottenham. Samuel Eto'o, who made a big impact in his one season at Chelsea. I'm told that there's an awful lot of names that haven't come to light yet that will at some point become more in the public domain. But Chelsea sort of all along, and I've known this for quite a while, that Chelsea felt that by taking the unusual stance they took, as in the new consortium of flagging it straight away to the Premier League, the FA and UEFA, that should, in a sense, for want of a better phrase, be rewarded with not a sporting sanction, but just a fine. And of course, I think the fact they negotiated £100 million discount from the get-go indicates that this was in their thinking from the very start.
It's a really interesting story and an angle on football takeovers as well, because in my time I've known of takeovers that have not gone ahead because owners have looked at the books and gone, whoa, that is too hot to handle for us. We'll step away and we'll go somewhere else. Thank you very much. So, Phil, where do you stand on this? Is it good that sort of Chelsea, as Simon said, dobbed themselves in, and they basically said, yeah, we might need to be held slightly accountable here, but we weren't the custodians, and therefore the club shouldn't be punished in a sporting sense. Where do you stand on it?
Yeah, I think what you're talking about there with, prospective owners coming in, looking at the books and saying, no, thank you. I've seen a bit of that as well. When Massimo Cellino bought Leeds United, he said quite openly, I never do due diligence because if I did, I'd find far too many things that would put me off buying a club. Now, Cellino was kind of one of a kind and said a lot of things. Where I think this is slightly different is that I suspect there aren't too many things in the average club accounts, which are going to run you into trouble immediately with, say, the FA or the Premier League or anything else. And that's clearly what Chelsea spotted in their accounts, or at least the Bowley Clearlake consortium, when they started to look at the books while they were trying to buy from Abramovich. And I think the reduction of £100 million from the asking price is really pertinent, because they could quite clearly see coming down the track there were going to be some major liabilities potentially with this that were going to cost them. So I think it will or might help Chelsea that they did self-report and, as Simon put it, dob themselves in. The problem is that admitting to an offence doesn't change the fact that an offence was committed in the first place. And it's important to say again that Chelsea haven't actually submitted a plea to this, I don't think. So we don't know whether they're going to plead guilty or fight the charges. I don't think a commission that hears the case can put too much weight on the fact that this seemingly happened under old owners and purely under old owners. The owners aren't Chelsea. Chelsea are still the same entity, whether Abramovich has the keys or Bowley and Clearlake have the keys. They still play in the Premier League. They won trophies through the period that the FA are investigating. So the prime question is going to be, did these alleged breaches give them an unfair sporting advantage? And just to single out Hazard, he was a massive player for Chelsea. I think he won 7 trophies in all while he was there. So if Chelsea signed him or other major names in circumstances where they shouldn't have done, the matter of gaining a sporting advantage has to be looked at. But where this will end, I mean, let's not even bother trying to guess. The Manchester City 115 charges case is still stuck in the long grass, so God knows how long this one's going to take. The thing that will dictate the speed of this will be the way in which Chelsea plead. If they plead guilty to the charges or most of them, then this can probably move forward pretty quickly. If they choose to fight them, then it will drag its heels. That is essentially one of the big problems with the City case, is that A, there are so many charges, and B, City are vehemently contesting them, and because of that it's got massively tangled in legal argument. So that may be one way out of this quickly, but we'll need to see what Chelsea do.
And just quickly to add, Adam, that the deadline for Chelsea to respond is tomorrow, I believe. Is tomorrow the 19th? I have no idea what the date is at the moment. And there was a question mark that 74 charges, that's an awful lot. The FA there was sort of indications that they'd be open to the idea of giving it an extension, because there were so many charges for Chelsea to respond to, and I've been assured that Chelsea won't ask for an extension. I think that's another indication that they feel that, however they sort of formally reply to the FA, that this case could be wrapped up pretty quickly.
Yeah, sounds like that's what they want, so they can just kick on with the future and try as best as they can to forget about the past. Simon, thank you very much indeed. I'm sure your short-term future is to just pick up your souvenir set of lederhosen before you fly back. Thank you very much. And thank you very much
Already
to
packed.
Phil as well. Pick up a pair for me as well. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Drop a like on the video. Leave us a comment as well. Be kind. And we'll catch you next time.
For more from the Athletic FC podcast, make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. We've got top journalists like David Ornstein, Matt Slater, Adam Crafton, Carl Anker, and plenty more through the entire season. Make sure you don't miss an episode of the Athletic FC. You can get it wherever you get your podcasts from.